There are several parts to this video, and in case you're not interested in some of them, I've listed them down below in the description with their times, so you can skip around to whatever interests you. As most of you know, when you bring new animals onto the place, it takes time for them to adjust. And so it was with the two new goats we brought. This is J2 being hounded by Bugzy, and the other little guy is Frostbite. J2 did not want to stay in the pen with everybody else because he was being harassed. We've always brought small animals home before and never adults, and so we've always kept them separated at first because we didn't want them to be picked on. We thought maybe since these two were full-grown goats that they would be able to fit in, but it probably would have been all right, except that our alpha goat, Tailagate, and Summit ganged up on J2, and that just wasn't fair, and he didn't like the harassing at all, which I don't blame him. It soon became obvious that we were going to have to build a separate pen for the new boys. As I mentioned previously, we always had two separate pens when we brought our new little boys in. One time we brought in two Oberhausley little guys from Kamei and stuck them in the back pen. We had 3 big goats in the front pen, and Tailgate was one of those when he was just 3 years old. So he wasn't much bigger than the new goats we brought home. We had him in the back pen, and the fence was 8 feet tall back there. And a bear came along and climbed over that fence and killed those 2 little boys. The 3 goats in front, it was a 4-foot fence, and they got the adrenaline pumping and jumped the fence and took off. That's one reason to this day that I won't have a fence more than 4 foot tall, because if a critter comes along and wants to harass and hurt one of my goats, I want them to be able to escape. It was so quiet when I went out to the goat pens that morning that I knew immediately that something was not right. And so the front part showed me that the big boys weren't there, and I went through the barn and into the back part, and the 2 little boys were lying over in the corner. We immediately started searching for the 3 missing boys, and finally that afternoon, some neighbors, our closest neighbors to the north, about a mile, called and said that there were 2 goats lying by the side of the road, fairly close to their place. So we went down and we were able to bring home Jasper and Dinky. That just left Tailgate missing. So I walked and I walked and I walked, and Rob took the 4-wheeler and rode all over, and our neighbor took her horse out and rode the rest of that day, and we didn't find him. The next day we still didn't find him. And then on the 3rd day it was raining, and by then I was really getting concerned about him. But that afternoon our same neighbor up the road called and said that Tailgate had shown up on his front porch. Tailgate's eyes were huge, and he ran for that goat barn. I wish he could have told us his story. It would have been interesting, I'm sure. When Rob put the doors on the barn for the goats, he just had the latches down at the bottom. But the goats would bounce on the door until those latches would come open and they could get into the hay. So he added the ones up on top, and they work really well. I still use both latches just as double insurance, and since Rob fixed this top one, they haven't escaped. If you've watched our previous videos, you know when we built the barn that we had 4 goats, and we lost one at Christmas time. So now that we're getting 2 additional goats, Rob needs to add another stall in the barn. It was where I had the grain and everything over there in the corner, but we'll just make a new stall, and then we'll have room for all 5 of the goats. We went to Plains, Montana to pick up the last two boys, J2 and Frostbite. We haven't been to Plains in about 10 years because that's where we got Tailagate at, and also Jasper. They're all distant related cousins, and they're all alpines. And the little lady we get them from lives out of town about 7 miles, out in the boonies actually, and I don't think she comes to town very often because when we went there was still snow and lots of mud, and all they had to push snow with, it looked like, was a pickup with a blade on it. It looked like Plains was a nice little town and had just about everything you could ask for. Annie has been having trouble with mountain lions killing her goats, so she had been putting the pressure on us to hurry up and come and pick our goats up. But we were glad that we hadn't done that because, as you can see, she still has snow on her road, plus it's pretty muddy, and we were pulling the traveling goat barn. But we did make it in, and when we got to her place, I was so busy I forgot to take pictures. She had a dog that was jumping all over us, and the goats were running around loose and being crazy. They didn't want to come and stay by us so we could make up our mind which two we were going to bring home. So anyway, I just forgot to take pictures. We left at 5 a.m. and got home at 7 p.m., which was good because we wanted the boys to be able to stay in the camper for the night. I have to confess that when we go to the back pond, it's always in the daytime, of course, and we usually don't get to hear this chorus that we're going to hear. But the other day we went by a pond and they were singing so loudly until we got right up to the pond. I have to admit that to get this wonderful music, I went down one night really dark except for this beautiful, gorgeous moon, and these guys were just singing so loudly at the top of their lungs. It was just wonderful.